Greetings, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Dreamscapes. Today we are graced with the pleasure of our friend Billy Nomad from Milton Keynes outside London. We're going to tell you more about him in just a moment, but first, I didn't have this ready to go. Like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. I always need more volunteer dreamers. Support my work. You can get t-shirts, coffee mugs, got that stuff on the Spring Store. Links in the description below. Also, 12 currently available published works of historical dream literature available on Amazon. The most recent book, 12, is The Philosophy of Sleep by Scottish native Robert McNish, and it's great we're talking to someone from the United Kingdom today. That's a very appropriate kind of thing. And this guy was really amazing. I mean, we could just jump into it and I'll have you introduce yourself in a minute, but this guy died at age 35 and he was a member of the Royal Society of Physicians in Glasgow and published like a dozen books or something like that. I don't have the number off the top of my head and a bunch of articles, but this guy was amazing. And the philosophy of sleep is really good for the 1800s. Man, this guy knew his stuff. But anyway, that's rambling about my stuff. We're here to talk to our guest, Billy Nomad, who is a singer, songwriter, recording artist, and producer. You can find him at The Billy Nomad on Facebook and Instagram, links in the description. But I always like to throw it over to guests and have them say a little bit about yourselves. So who are you? What do you do?
Hey, Benjamin. Thanks for having me on. Like I say, my name's Billy Nomad. I'm a singer-songwriter. I'm a recording artist. Really, what I do is I make music, and just like you, I've built a cave here where I'm surrounded by, I think, 36 musical instruments now, and every month I record a new song, stick it out on all the services, and try and record a music video. And I'm hoping I'll be back on tour in 2023 if I can get myself on the road by then. But
that's been one of the biggest tragedies of this difficult time we've gone through lately, is that a lot of the great art we need to keep us healthy, and the experience of going out in public with people to experience life is just gone. We need it back. We need it back to get over this, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And it was a big part of my life a few years ago, was touring and just getting out and meeting people like I'm doing right now, and sort of making friends. And then, like I was saying before we came on air, I booked these 2 gigs this month thinking it's fine, it's been 2 years now's the time. And then I got COVID. So I had to cancel the first gig. I've now got 2. I've got another one this month to make up for the one I missed. But, so I've still got 2 gigs this month. But let's hope I'll manage to keep healthy until then, and everyone else does.
Yeah, that's one of those wonderful ironies, is like, I'm ready to get back out there. No, you're not. It just kicks your ass and throws you back in bed. Come on.
We call that Sod's Law.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or Murphy's Law,
For sure. Yeah, no, I hadn't heard it expressed the other way, but I love those. Yeah. There are so many unique and wonderful cultural expressions. So just in general, and that bears on dreams and dreaming, because so I was talking to a gal in the episode in the 40s. I think it was the Nekwe Kagogo episode. I can't remember how it pronounces that, but it translates loosely in a particular African dialect, the leopard is scared, or the chicken of the leopard, depending on how it's. You want down, buddy? Anyway, the point on that is that I had to get into her understanding of what leopards were in the dream, because they featured in her dream, and it's going to mean something completely different to me as opposed to what it means in her culture, and why that image would represent a particular type of idea in a particular way, which then gives her the answer she's looking for. So you get these, all of this just was inspired by you making a reference I've never heard before, and then you said Murphy's Law, and I'm like, oh, okay, I get that. I know exactly what that is.
Yeah, of course. It's all about language, right? It's I'm kind of a multidisciplinarian in what I try to learn. So there's a bit of psychology, a bit of philosophy, a bit of life sciences and stuff. And so because I've got a lot of these different fields, I can kind of transfer language between and kind of lend myself to some language to explain certain things, but then use others to explain others. But I find that not a lot of people do that, do they? They get trapped in one subset of language, and myself especially, I haven't caught up with the kids. I haven't kept down with the kids. So they're saying things now. I'm 31 now, and they're saying things that I kind of get, I kind of understand, but it does make me feel old that there's this whole other language that I haven't bothered to learn yet.
Yeah, I get. So I'm in my mid Mid-40s. That's crazy. And I'm looking at kids like I've got a niece who's maybe, she's like 11, 12, something like that. And she's experienced a world I've never seen. What she's gone through and the new things that are being developed by that age group. We're not even going to start hearing about that until she starts speaking into public and sharing her perspective. Yeah, and that's always fascinating. This kind of generational renewal going on. And she's going to rediscover that everything old is new again, but that's also part of the growing up process.
Many skirts are cool again.
Right? I wonder if we're going to, a very interesting thing, we may be heading for some interesting reversals in that, where long skirts that cover the ankle come back into fashion as this.
They have here,
right, as this kind of
60s, 70s kind of,
Yeah, and it's like hearkening back to playing with the cultural norms of the, like, say, Victorian era, and say, what if we did that? And then some people just start doing it, and that builds its own psychology around that. But like, not what it was originally, but like a callback. It's almost a referential, ironic. I'm not describing that very well.
If you look at what was happening in the 60s and 70s, women were essentially, liberated as part of society. In certain ways, they're still very much a lesser treated sort of less fairly in certain areas of society. But so there was that thing in fashion where they're going, no, we will not wear long things. We will not hide our bodies anymore. We're sexy. And so, that's where you have a lot of the more provocative fashion. And of course, people are going, don't really feel that sense to liberate myself anymore. I feel like I've been liberated in that way. I've always been sort of free in that way. So then they'll experiment with their fashion whatever way they like, if they feel like they're not being oppressed that way, I guess. But yeah. I'm not really a cultural expert at all, but a lot of where I try and come from is just
definitely an armchair philosopher in terms of like the cultural stuff. Great. You have to be, like you were saying, to be a musician or an artist of a particular kind. It's one thing to say you from inside have something to express, but it also has to resonate with people's experiences and their thoughts, and even the cultural zeitgeist, whatever you call it, the spirit of the age. And that's kind of the success. I mean, there's monetary success, but there's artistic success, and they don't always go together, sadly. But to be artistically successful, you gotta tap into something. You gotta resonate with something, and you gotta have something to say, and the muse's got to inspire you. But it helps to be that multidisciplinary, as you were saying, that idea of a dabbler in a lot of different areas, so you've got your finger on the pulse. I like to say, what is it? Jackass of many trades and master of none.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
nice. That's
exactly. My dad said to me when I was a teenager, he said, "You know what your problem is, Bill?" He said, "You know a little bit about a lot." Yeah.
that can be a dangerous thing too.
It can be a very dangerous thing, because then you end up with this idea that you're somehow clever. And I just have to accept every day that I'm not an expert on anything. I know a little bit enough to talk about anything, but if you challenge me on anything, I'd probably go, no, that's as much as I knew. Sorry.
Yeah, sometimes you get to the end of your knowledge, and then that's what you, going back 2,000 years to Socrates, that's where the truly wise say, I don't know. They don't fake it to preserve their ego and their self-image. Yeah,
that's right. They say thank you, they nod politely, and they walk away. They go and study more. Yeah, exactly.
That's something new to think about. I will do so.
I think society has kind of, it's stopped being so much of a conversation. It's more become sort of a battle of opinions and a battle of ideas, where I think some of the best civilizations, like ancient Greece, were built on that idea of public discourse. Of the Stoa, of being able to turn up and debate things, and that actually having an impact on politics. Whereas now philosophers are bought and paid for by the government. So
that is a big issue. With the whole, we've and I've mentioned this before. I mean, we're way off topic, but I just love these conversations. No, this is great stuff. Someone was like, "What's happening with social media? Is this something new?" And I started thinking back. What was before that? What was before that? What was before that? And I got to this train of thought where it's like, we've been experiencing a hyper reality in a way ever since we started getting around the campfires in Cro-Magnon times and telling stories to each other. This is not my experience. This is fiction about people that incorporates real elements. And then it went from that to, oral traditions and histories, and then books and the printing press, and that was its own. So there's these revolutions, like, the oral history tradition of storytelling, books and printing press. Then it went into radio and television, which became, books were the first, say, mass media, because they went everywhere. Everyone could have a copy of the same book. And then radio and television kicked it up a notch, and then the internet. And I see it all as part of the same process. It's new and different, but it isn't. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
It does. It definitely makes some sense to me, and it's interesting to look at it that way. I certainly haven't really looked at it in that way anymore, because, I always look at social media as kind of this platform for social discourse, where the conversations can happen and people can really mess about with their feelings. But then we don't really know what social media is. People use it for this, that, and the other. I think you're right. I think the one thing people mainly use it for is to tell these stories, either to themselves and their friends and their families. They put up life updates, and they're just kind of going, here's another update to my story, here's another chapter. And even if that is just, I'm sharing something else, that chapter really is this thing that I'm sharing has affected me. That's a very interesting point of view. And I have to think more on that.
And so I referenced the idea of, and I'm not asking for agreement or answers, but the reason I referenced the hyper reality side of it is because someone made this point. This wasn't my original thought, but that what we often see on social media and on the internet, and certainly on television, is an impossible perfection. It's like the good parts version. You could have a shitty day, and one picture you post at the end of the night is, I'm so happy to be home doing these things I enjoy. And that's all that people see of you, because you want to represent yourself as happy or successful.
Yeah, that's not the reality, is it?
But you've had a shitty day and you went through all kinds of stuff. And so your neighbor looks and goes, my life is so miserable. I had a shitty day, but look at her. She's having a great time. But it's not true. It's not real. It's hyper real.
True.
Yeah.
You are right, and it's what I call a paradigm reality. And really, this is where I start going into my own areas of thought rather than actual qualified knowledge. But Aldous Huxley wrote The Doors of Perception, and in that he talked about island universes. And how they affect each other, how they touch each other, and how they come together. And how I think about paradigm realities is much the same thing. We all kind of build our own sense of reality inside our head, and that's affected by everything that's outside, all the stimulus and stuff. And so, I guess from a first-person point of view, social media is great because you get to tell a story. But from a third person point of view, that could be really bad, because then the story you're receiving isn't true. It's actually corrupting your reality. It's feeding you a lie, and you can really buy into those things. I think the best thing to do really is to not give social media the weight that it seems to have.
For sure.
But as you pointed out, your niece is born and raised in it, so I don't think we have a lot of say now as far as that goes. I think sort of TikTok is the future, and similar short form content like that.
I certainly think suppressing it is not the answer. Like I think that what the church, so to quote unquote, back in the day, tried to suppress the print. Well, the printing press actually gave us the Gutenberg Bible, which spread all that, and that was a big revolution too. But there was, then the attempt to respond to that technology by suppression rather than some other better form of management. And I see some tendency in that direction. Like we keep responding to these technologies and advancements and what we can do and how we can interact with. This is way outside my thoughts. Now I'm into how do I phrase this land, but I definitely think we have to respond to them very carefully. We have to make sure we don't overreact or take drastic measures to suppression. Always feels bad to me. It feels like it's the wrong answer. So that's my 2 cents. Absolutely. Let's talk about dreams. Yes, and this actually segues into the dream thing, because you were talking about people being an island. So you are in your head. I'm not. And so you're going to share with us something that's in your head. You're going to bring me and the viewers inside your head. We're going to swim around in there and try and first see what is going on, and then see if we can make sense of it and put it into a coherent story. So as per my usual process, I'm just going to shut up and listen. We're going to hear the dream as related, and then we're going to get into what the hell does it all mean. So I'm ready when you are.
Excellent. Okay, well, I've got a few here, and I've got them kind of listed because I wasn't sure how many you'd want or what you want. But the first one, the top of the list, is one that I call the man in the wardrobe. Right, and this is a recurring dream. I must have had it at least 4 or 5 times growing up in the same house, and then once in a house after the fact. We moved house, and I had the dream once again, but in the dream I was still in the same house. So what happens is me and my brother used to share a bedroom, and our beds were side by side, and there was a walkway big enough for a person to comfortably walk through in the middle, which led into an open space in the bedroom. And at the very end of that open space in the bedroom was a wardrobe. And the door was next to that, so, if I wanted to get past the wardrobe to the door, I would have to go right in front of it. And really, I was blocked in from every other direction. And what would happen is I'd wake up slipping out of bed. So it would be in the process of slipping out of bed onto the floor in between mine and my brother's beds. Now, instinctively, I would try and climb onto my brother's bed. I wouldn't try and get back into my own bed straight away. I'd be like basically clawing at and clambering and trying to get up onto my brother's bed. And he'd be unresponsive, and I'd be like calling to him and trying to get his attention. And I'd be panicking before anything's really happened. I've fallen on the floor and I'm panicking. And then all of a sudden, the wardrobe bursts out. There's 2 doors and there's 2 drawers underneath it. So it's kind of a raised wardrobe. And this figure kind of springs out of it. It's a typically human form, but entirely in shadow. I can't make out anything about it at all, other than it seems to be male, but it's coming fast. I don't even have time to register it before it's like on top of me, and then it just starts beating me and beating me and beating me. And the weird thing is, a couple of times when I woke up for that dream, I would still feel like I'd been beaten up. It would actually feel like I'd been sapped of energy and stuff. Never any marks, obviously. I'm due to talk about this on a ghost podcast at some point, and really to see what they make of it, because that house had all sorts of creepy things going on in it, and that in particular, the recurring dream about the man in the wardrobe, that was quite scary. But that's the dream basically. I'd wake up after a couple of seconds, couple of blows, this guy would just be pummeling me, and then I'd wake up and it would be the morning. It'd be like I wouldn't even have another dream after it. It'd very much be like, whoa, what's just been happening? But that happened probably between the ages of, when we moved into that house, I was about 3 or 4, and then we moved out when I was 11. So it would have happened in between that period. And then, of course, I had it again shortly after we moved into the other house. So I would have been around 11 when I had it.
Okay, and then that particular type of dream stopped happening after that?
That stopped. I had another recurring nightmare that used to happen around a similar time. And that actually carried on a little bit more as we moved into the other house. And that was just, I'd be walking around the house, and no one will be there. It would be kind of twilight. I wouldn't be able to find my siblings or my parents. I'd be walking around, there'd just be this booming voice saying, "Get out, get out." And that would creep me out. And I'd wake up feeling like I'd actually experienced that. It was quite a lucid dream.
Wow. And that carried over from moving from one house to another. Yeah,
I had that probably about 3 or 4 more times after we moved into the new house. But what was interesting is the first one I always had in that same bedroom, same layout and everything. But in the new house, the house changed with the dream. Because in the first house, I can remember it was always a distinct moment would be having searched upstairs, knowing no one's there, so then traversing down the stairs slowly. And that would tend to be when I'd hear the first instance of the voice and get out. And so I remember the differences in the dreams in the going down the stairs, the 2 different staircases. So those ones have always haunted me. I always remember them, even though they happened when I was quite young.
Yeah, left a very strong impression to have that stay with you for this long.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
And then you raised a fascinating point too. You're going on a different show to get a different perspective on it. So I'm going to look at it from, I call myself a wizard, and I speak in metaphorical, supernatural, mystical language about very practical, I believe, scientific processes, biological and psychological. But I'm not the only guy. And there's a number of ways to look at these things. And what if I give you one answer and you go on this other podcast, they give you a completely different perspective? Take them both. Take them both and make of it what you will. Yeah.
I really like the idea that you can give me a more professional, refined, and maybe clinical approach to it, whereas they are going to be relying very much on allegory and pseudoscience and their own beliefs in order to kind of fulfill how they interpret that story. So I'm really interested to see both sides because I'm quite a diverse, open-minded person. So I love to hear everyone's thoughts on it. And really, this is the first time I've really spoken about it in years as well. So it's kind of interesting for me to kind of bring it out of the box and see what happens with it.
So I will say first off the bat is that working with much older dreams can be more difficult. So I'll take anything. And there was even a gal that contacted me about lucid dreaming. I don't know anything about that. I don't know what it is. I don't know how it works. I've never experienced it. Let's see what happens. Let's talk about it. So that might be a little teaser.
The other dreams on my list are all lucid dreams, and that's the other interest in me. But I will say, I'm often dream suppressed because I'm medicated. So like I have dreams very rarely. And I do have some underlying conditions like autism that do explain some of the neurological things that happen when I'm going to sleep or when I'm waking up. So, but like generally, yeah, like I still think that when I do have dreams, they're really weird and bizarre. But yeah, I don't know what to make of the lucid dreams either. So I'd much rather talk about those nightmares.
For sure. And I think they are pretty relevant. So what I was getting to is that there's a challenge. If something is recent, you had this dream last night, we can talk about what happened in the week before, what happened that day, what happened right before you went to bed, really get specific. Some of these things going back, it's going to rely a little bit on your memory of childhood experiences to put it into context, which can be a challenge, but you may remember sufficiently well. You definitely remember that you moved houses. Sometimes these things have to do with, family dynamics or friends you had at the time or other experiences you had. So we're going to see if we can draw that out a little bit. The other challenge with recurring dreams that happened years ago is, do you remember a specific instance of having had that dream, or has it all faded into the 30,000 foot overview?
It's very much over at this point. I can remember some of the things that were happening around that time, but yeah, not necessarily surrounding one specific event of it. I can tell you, no, you see, because my dreams are quite suppressed on a regular basis, I don't tend to. I'm trying to think of when the last time I had a dream was.
Well, I don't mean to put you on the spot or encourage you to change anything. We can work with what you got.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's going to change the nature of what we're able to do with it, and
no worries.
And how we get to those answers. But it's a wonderful challenge for me too, because I want to start working with some of this older material. This is the great thing about this thing. I never know what I'm going to get. People just throw shit in my lap, and I do what I can with it. And it's a good challenge for me as well to say, expand your ability to kind of conceptualize these things.
Brilliant.
So normally what I would do is go to the specific dream imagery, and we would go through it step by step, what you remember, and then those promptings kind of draw out a little additional information. But we can do that same broad process with a older recurrent dream, and we just talk about the sequence of events that seems to repeat. I don't want to tear that off yet. So you said this took place in a bedroom you shared with your brother, and you had the kind of classic side-by-side beds with a little aisle in between, I guess.
Yeah.
And then maybe if we start with a little, and you were very descriptive with the layout of the room, and I kind of got it, but you said there's kind of a long-ish hallway that's behind the door, behind the door to the room itself, and you walk down that short hallway, and then it kind of is the word debouches into into the open room space itself. We're gonna get a graphic here, all of you on the podcast. you better watch the show on YouTube.
There you go. You've got So there's the beds, and then there's the wardrobe, and there's the bedroom door.
Okay, gotcha.
So I would tend to fall into this space here, and then he'd come out at me basically while I was on the floor here.
Good deal. I had it, and that's great. I'm glad you were able to show it. I had a different conception of what it might look like in the Well, in my own head. So this is what we do. So there was so rather just a regular kind of square, rectangular shaped room, and there was a wardrobe
That's
at the
right.
end of it, and the two beds side by side. And you said between the ages of 4 and 11. How much older or younger is your brother?
He is 18 months older than me.
Okay. Interesting. Very close in age, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
Like my brother and I are 5 years apart, so that's a
Oh, wow.
much bigger gap. Yeah.
Yeah, me and my siblings were all within 3 years of each other, and then my parents were like, that's enough. They went through this period at 18,
Yeah.
like 19 or 21 when they were having kids, and they went, nope, that's it now.
Yeah, and it's much easier. I think the age gap always made it a little more difficult for my brother and I to connect because as kids, it's big. You know, I'm 14 and he's 9, and we're not really doing things together. We're not in the same circles. At least if you're 2 years apart, you could be, 15 and 17, and you're still you're right there.
We were in school together most of the time, sort of like so we kind of, although we didn't have the same friends, we very much knew each other. As teenagers, especially, we
very much more overlap in your experience of life.
I think because of that, we're far more similar people than perhaps you and your brother are, because we had a lot of the same interests because we're around the same age. My parents used to dress us the same until we were probably about 5.
Little matching outfits, right?
They thought, well, they're close enough, they might as well be twins. Let's put them in matching jumpers and things.
That's pretty funny. Yeah. Parents got to play dress up with your kids. They're up to a certain age. They are little dress up dolls, and you just have fun with them. Because otherwise,
what else are they going to do?
Otherwise, nonstop screaming and shitting and feeding would just drive you crazy. You got to have some fun.
Yeah, exactly, and it entertained us as well. I know certainly, sort of like we had some fun with those clothes.
So do you remember even at that time, kind of, what am I trying to say? Almost feeling twin-like, or was there never really that experience?
No, I was always player 2 to my brother, so it was kind of like he was always kind of the leader, and he was the one that I could kind of rely on to convey some sense of reality to me in the moment, So it's kind of it doesn't shock me in that dream that I was kind of reaching up to his bed because I knew something bad was going to happen.
That was an immediate connection, I thought too. Is and that. So the sequence of events in the dream tends to be you wake up in the dream, but the thing that seems to awaken you is this sensation of falling or sliding out of bed.
Sliding, yeah, it's weird. It's kind of like I've rolled over too far, or slipped over too far in bed, and I'm sliding down the edge of the mattress onto the floor. And so I'm that's happening with me wrapped up in my duvet and everything. It's kind of like I've suddenly found myself in an incident falling on the floor. And because of that, I can't be sure if it's real or not. And there's definitely that idea in my head when it starts kind of like, wait, am I awake? Am I asleep? And I'm not even thinking, am I asleep? In my head, I'm straight away going, I'm awake. So it's, that's probably the scariest moment of the dream, bar the actual man launching himself at me, is that moment where I'm not sure what's happening. I'm just falling onto the floor or this thing. But there is an almost third person perspective to it as well, which is quite an interesting thing.
That's very cool too. Yeah, I was going to ask that as well. But before I forget the detail, your experience of falling out of bed is wrapped in your blankets?
That's right. I kind of feel it's sort of like it's more when you've got the duvet separate from the cover, separate from the sheets, and I can kind of feel that I'm tangled up in it.
That is interesting too. That's a good. So it isn't. Sometimes what's there and what's not there are equally relevant. So it is not falling out of bed naked or in your PJs or whatever and landing on the floor, like slipping out from underneath the covers, but you take them with you. And there's this, which makes sense and probably the reason that imagery exists is to give you that impression of entanglement, to kind of heighten the tension of the drama, so to speak. It seems likely. It's like your mind saying, and also, what is it? Okay. Also the idea of, and I don't know what to make of it yet, but it's tickling my brain as far as the idea of this sliding sensation and falling out of bed being the moment of awakening. So there's some attention grabbing reason for that experience. You didn't wake up and feel the need for a glass of water and sit up on the edge of the bed and stand up and then the cabinet bursts open. It's very much this something's happening to you in a very involuntary sense. So this is where my brain starts going with these things, is like, why this particular representation of a...
And it's quite interesting. I've had another dream a couple of years ago where I did sort of like, I felt like I was basically being held down. So across my legs. And that was quite a strange dream to wake up from, because it was that very similar feeling of kind of being restricted and being kind of waking up in a struggle, rather than like, you know, it's like you said, there's no moment of, oh, I'm awake and now the dream is going to start. It's very much sort of like starting during the incident, which is and then kind of, it's a very end-to-end dream. So it starts during the incident and it ends sort of like almost mid-incident, to be honest, because it's almost like, you know, I don't know what happens to me after that. Do I get beaten to death? Does someone come and save me? Or you know, like I wake up sort of like during the beating. So
and I think we're going to get to that too. But it's very significant, in my opinion, that the dream does end mid-attack versus, you know, you get slapped around a bit and then the thing disappears, or it escalates to a point where you feel you could be, your life could be threatened, and then you wake up, that kind of thing. It's just, so there's, it's very much what is it like if you're watching a video of a train? You could watch a video of a train where it starts from a dead stop, picks up speed, and then arrives at the depot and decelerates and comes to a complete stop. Or you can watch a video, the moment the video starts, train's in motion, full speed, and it's just happening, and the video ends before it arrives at the destination. So that's what we've got. We've got this truncated process in motion view of what you're attempting to conceptualize in your childhood brain there. So that's, again, nope, no idea what it means, not yet, but looking at it from that angle. So a lot of these things I start saying to people is to get your brain, let it start percolating. But this is a new analogy I just thought of. It's like we get this chunk of marble and there's a statue in there somewhere, and we just start knocking off little corners, and we're saying, you know, it's this, but not that. Okay, there's a chunk. And then after a time you start going, I don't know what I was making or what this is, but now I'm starting to see it. That's kind of what the process does for us, is draws those little limits on where we put our focus. Anyway, I'm rambling. I love my analogies.
It's very interesting. I think that's very clever, and it's almost like forensics, isn't it? We kind of like, you start off with this black bag operation. It's your job to kind of draw the lines and figure out where they all go.
Yeah, it's definitely a detective. So I'd like to, this is self-aggrandizing, I'd like to think of myself as a Dr. House or Sherlock Holmes style, which actually, I don't know if a lot of people got that reference. Dr. House, Sherlock Holmes. It was basically a medical Sherlock Holmes reference.
What's his name? So I think what's Hugh, Gregory House. Gregory House.
And also the funny thing, he had an opioid pain pill addiction, and Sherlock Holmes was an opium. It was like,
and you got Wilson and Watson as well. Yeah, you know, Wilson's his clear psychic, and then Watson's Sherlock psychic. That
was such a great show.
That is proper clever. To be honest, I started watching that because my parents thought I was Aspergers when I was a kid. Turns out I was. But the
literally me too.
The way
I knew the hair wasn't for show.
I know, so I'm just lazy and
Fellow
I like
wizard.
the way it touches my face. They basically said to me, this is their way of dealing with me with autism at the time, was like, oh, we think you've got Asperger's because we've seen the show called House. You should watch it. And then that was it. It was left like that.
And being just a little older than you, I've been a fan of Hugh Laurie going way back to when he was working with Rowan Atkinson in the 70s.
Man, have you seen Fry and Laurie as well? Him with Stephen Fry doing some stuff, and
Yeah. Oh, that is great. I didn't think he could pull off a dramatic role like that. I'm like, really, Stephen? Hugh Laurie in this type of it, and he nailed it.
Yeah.
It really went from, brought the comedic aspect to it, but went the, from like goofy comedy and silly absurdity to this really great dramatic role.
It gives him character. Although he's got a sense of humor, that's just another aspect of the character, isn't it? And the interesting thing about Hugh Laurie, apparently he walked into the audition speaking in that accent, continued through the first areas of production basically with that accent, and it took the producers a while to figure out that he was British.
Right? That's always impressive. That's always impressive to me too. When a Yank can pull off a good British accent, and when a person from the United Kingdom can pull off say like a Southern accent, that kind of thing, where it's like, it's not just American, it's like a dialect of American. It nails it. Yeah. That's impressive. Yeah. And then to me, never know, because I've never heard the person speak.
Oh man, I wish I'd come on with a Welsh accent or something now. Got hair in my mouth. Talk about the hair.
Oh, right. Oh, it does. It drives me crazy. This is just the wild mountain man hair. Someone I used to work with told me I remind them of this myth of a Chinese hermit who was a crazy man, lived up, and it was like the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm like, oh yeah,
you're like Schwanzer.
That might have been the guy's name. Is that?
There you go.
Is that the Chinese mystic hermit?
Well, you've got Lao Tzu, and then you've got Schwanzer, and you've got all of them, man. They're all basically old Taoist sages and stuff. Yeah, you definitely pass as a Taoist sage. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. That may be honestly, if I could achieve something where
you're doing it.
I'm just living in that in my head. That moment, I got a feeling of like, oh, I would be so happy.
You're living the life of a sage right now.
I'm trying.
You're pursuing a level of intellect while just generally partaking in the natural discourse of experience. It's wonderful to see. I really do. Someone asked me on a radio show recently. They said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, living in a cave on my own.
Absolutely.
Like that. Because that would be so peaceful. Think about it. Although it'll take a while to get, over all the convenience that you've lost. But otherwise it'd be like, life makes sense here.
Yep, it does. If I just have my own little space, I can be happy. For sure. Well, speaking of little spaces, we got this bedroom, and we've got we kind of fell off track with the train analogy. Bringing it back around. To this sliding out of bed, you land on the floor and you're entangled, and you described almost an instant experience of panic, like you needed to get off the floor, get to safety of some kind. That's what you were experiencing?
Yeah, so it's like I don't even think for a second about sort of like why am I on the floor or what's going on. The second I hit the floor, it's like, oops, like whoopsie, get off the floor right now. It's like red alert in the head. Shouldn't be here, need to leave here right now.
How, if you think about it a little bit, how did the covers, blankets, play into the act of reaching or trying to scramble onto the brother's bed? Any connection there, or did they fall away on their own, or were they restraining you a bit? You couldn't reach because you were tangled?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, that, and I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying about a mix of perspectives, because in one aspect I'm kind of seeing first person some of this experience, but then also almost experiencing it from a third person point of view, just slightly above myself, almost being able to see my hair and stuff as I'm trying to struggle. But then also being blind and not actually really seeing anything at all, and kind of experiencing that, like everything's really dark and everything's overwhelming and I'm not really able to fully perceive. And I don't know if that's where, because I'm panicking, I'm trying to open my eyes in the awake world, so that my brain is going, oh no, you can't see anything, it's darkness.
Yeah.
I'll leave that to you to discern. But
those are absolutely relevant questions to ask, and they may play a part of it, and it may be a significant part, or it may be a not insignificant, but what am I trying to say? It's like, of course that contributes, but it doesn't mean anything. Kind of, it's hard to juggle those. We're carving the statue. We're getting there.
I can remember reaching up onto my brother's bed and kind of feeling the same sensation of the sheets and stuff kind of around my hand. and on my hand, and not really being able to get grip on them. So kind of like I'm putting my hand up there. So I'm not sure if that's my hand is still inside my own duvet, and that's why I don't seem to be able to get a purchase, or whether that's I'm experiencing reaching up onto his duvet and sort of trying to. I realize I keep on saying duvet. What do you guys call it over there?
Comforter, or just a blanket? Top
blanket,
sheet, top blanket.
Top sheet.
Yeah, well, top was bottom sheet, top sheet. I was trying to think of the other words, but comforter or blanket. I think
blanket.
covers the bases. Comforter is a thicker winter. Like that's what I've got on here right now.
We have comforters here all year round because we live on a tropical island, but the weather doesn't realise it.
Right? If only the weather would cooperate. Damn it! It would be so lovely here. Well, I felt it was another interesting coincidence. Synchronicities out the wazoo, just for me all the time. It just happens because I'm just watching. We got a nice dense fog today here in Portland, Oregon, and it's like, I'm talking to a guy from England, and
I live by a canal, so we constantly get fogs around this time of the year. It sort of turns into Silent Hill. As you walk into the local shop, you're like looking out for any nurses and stuff.
Oh yeah, no, that's creepy as hell. You mentioned you saw my game stream with the 7 Days to Die, and when fog rolls in that game, that's creepy too.
That really is. The sense gives me sort of panic, even though I know I'm playing a game. I'm just kind of like, no, like I know that now there's every opportunity that something's going to be right next to me, and I'm not going to notice that. It's like that in dreams, though. Often some of the scariest dreams are when I can't see and when I'm blinded, right? When it's like,
and I think that's a significant part of this dream too, is that you've got an interesting mixed bag of perspectives going on. It's like you are in your body looking out. You are outside observing yourself, and you're having trouble seeing anything. All of this at the same time. So
it's happening so quickly.
Yeah, and the speed of it not allowing for time to adjust. I mean, all of these things are feeding into to give us the kind of story arc of what's happening. But it's so your brain's saying, imagine you're thrust into an immediate situation that you don't even know why you're there. You don't know if you fell out of bed or if something yanked you out of bed. All you know is you're falling, you're in it. This is happening. You're suddenly in an insecure position. Beds, being in bed always feels better than being on the floor, especially in the dark of night. There's something iconic in there too. And being on the ground is a kind of vulnerable position to be in. Not only that, you're bound by this representation of something that limits your motion, and you're in an instant panic, but at the same time, you're having trouble taking effective action to remedy your own situation. You can't get out of the blankets, you can't scramble up onto the bed, you can't even see yourself, even though you're trying to. And in your brain, what I'm thinking from that is you're trying to solve your problem by assessing the situation from different angles. First person perspective, outside looking in. I'm covering my bases. How do I solve this problem? And what seems to follow on the heels of that is this representation of, I can't see at all. It's too dark. I'm unable to see my way out of this situation specifically. So something in all of that, just represented by that very brief, almost split second experience.
It's almost the whole dream can't last any more than 10 seconds if you kind of played it out in real time, 15 seconds max, because by the time I've then reached onto my brother's bed, it's only a second then before this thing comes out of me, and I'm looking over it as it comes out of the wardrobe. Now that's when it's an interesting third person perspective, because I almost see it as if I'm stood at the door and seeing this thing run through the room toward me laying on the floor. So again, there's almost this change of perspective there, but then I'm very much aware that I am the person on the floor, and I'm blind, and I'm feeling myself being beaten. I'm not seeing myself being beaten. That's interesting. I think I may have had the dream in a couple of different ways. Or I may now. There's the thing about confabulation, isn't it? All about confabulation, the invention of memory. Mm-hmm. So like now I'm trying to remember, did I see the beating from a first person perspective? Because I almost remember seeing arms You know what I mean?
And you may have seen them both, and they might have followed on each other. Like you have this, now look at a third person, watch yourself being attacked, and now experience what that feels like as it's happening. It might have bam, bam.
That's an interesting. I didn't actually think about the fact that it may have been framed in that way. I'm almost seeing it as like a thread of reality, but of course it isn't. It's a dream, so it could be a whole substract of different sort of frames and ideas just thrown into. I mean, I don't know too much. How do dreams construct themselves after sleep? You know, do you know much about that?
Well, that is very much an open question. A lot of what we've got is accumulated anecdotal evidence in the strictest sense. Well, tell me what you experienced. And then we have a bunch of individual experiences that hopefully add up to data points. But a lot of it's theoretical too. So because I'm reading all the historical dream literature, we go back to Freud, say, and he tied together a lot of things. A lot of the books that I'm editing and releasing, that's what he read before his work. That's all the studying that he was aware of, which, you know, I don't think I'll ever be able to get around to doing my own edition of the interpretation of dreams, because I think the Freudian Society still owns the copyright or something. Like, I don't think I can reproduce it without permission, but maybe I'll do a commentary work on it someday. Wow. Anyway.
That would be a great idea. You know, put your own foreword on it.
Yeah. So of course, Freud had his conception of latent content that is hidden, like the real motivations he's digging for, the secret wish that we deny ourselves or censor, and that expresses itself as the manifest content. But then even that, and that's what is then impacted by, after we wake up, we get into secondary elaboration, which is now we're trying to put it together in our mind in a way that makes sense, and that can distort the picture, it can reorder some things sometimes. And then that's where you have to dig back through the, and the secondary elaboration is then considered the dream as related, the story we tell.
Yeah. So it's almost, and that's really the element of confabulation, because we do the same thing with our memories, right? We kind of go, right, let's remember it so that we can tell it to someone else so that they can find a way of remembering it, building that as a memory.
And if you ever want to know whether your memory is trustworthy, just ask your wife, remember that restaurant we went to 5 years ago and I said this thing? She's like, you didn't say that. We never went there. Or we were there, but you didn't say that. Or I remember you being embarrassing. I thought it was hilarious. No, it's for sure. So now that's just specifically the Freudian perspective. And there's a lot of other ways of looking at it, but he raised some very important questions, and he's not at least wrong to ask. Are we seeing it clearly? Are we hiding things from ourselves? Are we relating it accurately? These are all actually wonderful scientific process questions. So, I mean, long story short on where dreams come from and whether they are changed after we wake up, it's almost certain they are in some ways, but they seem to still give us the ability to have a good discussion about the broad themes and specific events that seem most clear, and get a sequence to them and come to some kind of relevant understanding of why those thoughts at that time and what sense you can make of it today. So it's kind of my process is
fascinating, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. And my process is really no process at all. I just listen to people tell their dream. We talk about it and then we see what makes sense. And it seems, I like leaving it, I go back and forth, but I like almost leaving it loose. Like, I don't want to make it rigid because I feel like it would almost steal the magic from it. And like and not just the mystery. Like, I'm not trying to be obtuse, but the idea that if I don't start with that block of stone uncarved from the very beginning and just see what happens, then I'm starting to put my own shape on it before the person tells me what it is. So I'm really trying to avoid that observer bias part of this process.
I'm really trying to avoid telling you things that I've invented and added on later on. So I'm being doubly sure to go back and double check my thinking on it, and that's why I'm kind of going, like, what perspective was that from?
Never hurts to think hard about it again. And if you say, I don't know, I can't say for sure. I can tell people don't make something up to make something up to have a good episode or to have something to say. Yeah. I rattle a lot of doorknobs and they come open or they don't, and that's okay. And then my assumption, you challenge my assumptions too. If I ever say, was it like this? And you're like, no, I don't feel it here,
Yeah. So the interesting thing about being on the floor as well, just to go back to being on the floor, I can remember being distinctly terrified of the underneaths of our beds, and I think a lot of kids have that fear of what's under the bed, and that definitely came to me through pop culture and media and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I can remember that perhaps playing a part in why I was scared of being on the floor, because it was like suddenly I'm in the realm of the monsters now.
Yes, and that is a fantastic way to put it too. This is very much a I am in danger situation, and it's giving you definitely classic, iconic childhood representations of what's in the closet, what's under the bed. These and it isn't. Well, one thing I try not to do is just dismiss it as, well, of course, children are afraid of the unknown, and now you have your answer, and it's no surprise these images would show up. Well, it's not surprising, but it still means something.
What I like what you mentioned as well is that problem-solving mentality that I've gone into. I'm a project manager, essentially. That's really, if you looked at my job on paper, that's what I do for a living. I look at a problem and I learn how to solve it. So that's quite interesting to hear you say that without even really me having to explain that side of my job yet. So it's interesting that this dream maybe played a part in my early development of that as a way that my mind works.
Well, as challenging as it is to go back and look at dreams from a memory perspective, from linking it to specific events that might have triggered it perspective, it does give us these fascinating views of people's stable personalities over time. Even as through 11-year-old child, you were already starting to approach problem solving in a way that would not just impact and shape, but that was just consistent with who you are for your entire life. That is always fast. I've come across that more than once. These stable personality characteristics. And it's not uncommon either. And again, it's one of those things where it sounds obvious or it sounds unsurprising, but that a kid is going to have nightmares specifically related to being in a situation they can't handle in a way, because that's a very common childhood experience. They don't know, they don't know anything. None of us are born with the answers to a lot of these questions.
I still feel like that now,
right? We are slowly building competence, one success at a time. Yeah. The question then becomes underneath that is, why these dreams? What perhaps struggles with competence or success or ability to deal with danger were you dealing with, and what am I trying to say? What would have prompted you to be dwelling on that in your sleep in a way that comes back representationally in this form? Again, I don't have an answer yet, but that's kind of the way to look at it. And, why this form of looking at danger and problems versus another form? You weren't hanging off a cliff. You weren't playing in traffic and a car's coming. Those are different kinds of experiences. So you're on the floor and you're scrambling you're tangled in your bedclothes and you get this multiple perspective thing. You reach out for help. And I remember you mentioned your brother is unaware.
Yes. No. It's almost like he's facing the other way. I haven't been able to engage him at all.
And so that's another specific type of imagery as well. He didn't look at you and kick your foot off the bed or, push you back. He didn't look and stare blankly and ignore you. He was really unavailable, unaware. There's this, you're reaching out for help. He doesn't even know you're reaching out for help. He doesn't even have the opportunity to help. It all kind of happens too quickly, but there's something there of, the first thing that comes to my mind is the idea of reaching, you're player 2 reaching to player 1 because he's more skilled. Maybe he has the answers. Maybe he can provide some support or solution to what you're dealing with. But for some reason, your brain wants you to think, imagine he can't solve this problem for you. You're going to have to deal with this yourself. There's something in there. Okay. I don't know what it means yet, but that's what it seems like to me. Because it would be a different message, a different concept of the situation if your brain was telling you, look, he doesn't care. That It's not that.
Oh, I mean, I think I maybe because I feel there was a lot of bad blood. As much as we talked about how we were closer in some ways, there was a lot of jealousy and a lot of competition on both sides as we were growing up, and I feel like that. Me feeling like I couldn't necessarily rely on him for support. That is something that, as I've grown up now, we've actually grown apart quite a lot. And I suppose that come from as we grow up and we become teenagers and we had our own friends and stuff. I did feel like we didn't have the best relationship, and I do wonder around that time, especially when we're at that age, we were constantly forced to live together. We were constantly forced to be brothers and
to share that space.
To share that space. But I don't necessarily feel like there was necessarily a familial bond there. We never really sort of like, he never really made much effort to look after me, but then I never really made much effort to ask him to look after me either. And so in this stream, that's quite an interesting idea that, he wasn't engaged and perhaps wasn't available. I don't think that I come from a family of emotional availability necessarily. So that's an interesting point that you've made there, and that may be something to think about.
Could be, yeah. And what I'm seeing from this particular representation, and you, of course, the dreamer's always right, like the customer's always right. It's rather than an active rejection or even it's more, what it feels like more to me is like an indifference, but indifference feels even wrong. Like it's the wrong attitude. It
felt like a failure on my part. In the dream, it definitely felt like a failure on my part that I wasn't able to engage him, that I wasn't able to get his attention before the worst happened.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I can definitely remember it not feeling like, oh, you idiot, wake up, come on. I can remember feeling in myself, kind of going, oh, I can't believe I didn't manage to get his help. I can't believe I didn't manage to wake him up on time.
Interesting. This just brought this idea to my mind, but did you have, what am I trying to say? Experiences growing up where you looked at his example and intentionally chose to do things a different way? I'm not going to be like him, and then maybe it didn't work out. Like maybe, and then you look back and say, I should have done what he did.
He's been massively socially successful for our entire life, whereas I went the other way. For much of my life, between about 12 and 21, I hid away from pretty much everyone. I just stayed in my lab making music. And he was the opposite. He was like social butterfly. And so with that, it was very much like, no, I'm going to do the opposite to that. I'm not going to go out and spend all my time with my friends and having good times. I'm going to stay here and become disciplined and really hone into my craft and things like that. And I regretted that. I really did. And that's why I got to about 21 and went, fucking hell, I need some friends.
Yeah, because that almost seemed like if we put this kind of a story arc on it, and it just kind of snapped together a little bit for me. But imagine you've made a mistake, or at least you're failing at something, failing to stay in bed to the point you slip out of it. You reach for a role model's example or to follow their path, but you fail to do it well, or you fail to achieve that connection in a way that solves your problem, and the result seems to be a threat looming nearby jumps out and gives you a pounding, but it just distributes like a punishment for the failure. Is there something resonating in that description?
Oh man, yeah. I think because he kind of forced me to be player two. That was his thing. He was kind of, I'm older brother, I'm boss, So he kind of forced me to be player two, and I wasn't very good at it. I wasn't very good at video games when I was younger. I'm good at very, very specific types of video games now. So
yeah.
But definitely maybe that has something to do with it. And I'm only using the player one, player two analogy. That very much shaped our entire relationship. That mentality of he was big brother, I was little brother. But yeah, certainly I think, especially at that time, I would have been feeling like I wasn't necessarily shaping up to be what I expected. And when you say, wanting to, do things differently. I didn't want to be player 2. I wanted to be player 1, because player 2 always slid off the side of the screen and wasn't actually really important. Whereas, as any person does, any human being does, I wanted to be important for a little while, and I wanted to be, number 1. So, and that's one thing my psychiatrist talked to me about during my autism assessment is, one of my maladaptions is I've created my world and things have to be my way. And that's a control mechanism sprung out from sort of maladaption as a kid of things seemed out of control. So I tried to control everything. So around that time, I can definitely see, that especially around a lot of what you're saying, there would have been this whole kind of not feeling like I was good enough and reaching out to kind of go, tell me I'm good enough, and not really feeling that.
Yeah, and there's that angle of it too, the idea of reaching out for approval, perhaps. But in this context, it seems more like reaching for, and it's not like reaching for your brother to save you necessarily. You're trying to get into his bed, and his bed is his. It's not just his space, but it's also his, we could say, mindset, his abilities, his success. It's almost like occupying the same status as him. You've got your own bed, you've got his own bed, you're in a crisis, you're reaching out to get into the space that he occupies, not to have him as a person solve your problem, step in and big brother, I got this, I'll beat up the bully necessarily, but to, like, if you, almost as if you could be more like him. He would solve your problem. So that's more the direction I'm looking at it from.
Wow,
I don't know if I just repeated myself, or
you definitely refined your point, and that is an interesting concept as well. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's been a lot of living vicariously. Is that the right term for it? Sort of like my dad was a musician, so my dad was a musician, and my older sister started to learn music, and then my brother started to learn music, and so I started to learn music, But when it came to that, I collaborated with my dad. I collaborated with my sister. But I put myself in endless competition with my brother, and he did the same with me. Maybe wanting to occupy that space in the family of the musician, the musical one in the family. But these dreams are happening much earlier than that. So I'm imagining what other things were going on, what other developmental complexes that share a similar origin. To the musicianship that, I definitely think a lot of those feelings were manifest rather than sort of, rather than just being a side effect of certain circumstances like learning music. I feel like that would have happened if, he started to be a carpenter. I probably would have gone, right, I'm going to start making some chairs and I'm going to be better. Might have been.
Yeah, and you're great to mention the idea of developmental stages too, because there's as a child, our vocabulary, our ability to conceptualize the world is going to be very limited in a lot of ways. But a lot of we're still human, having human experiences. We just don't have the complexity to put it into different shapes and look at it with perspective and all these different things. So you get very simple iconography, limited to this bedroom that was a important part of your life. Every inch of it because you played Legos on the floor and slept there every night. And so it puts you in this space and it gives you very simple representations of what's going on. So there's probably, having the older brother is many times you had the common experience of looking up to him as you're growing. He's accomplished. Wow, he's so good at that. Oh, he's got almost 2 years more practice at it. Always going to be kind of just ahead of the curve. So there's something that is, and I don't want to phrase it as resentful because that may come in there. I was like, oh, I'm angry, I'm not as good. Fair enough, but also aspirational. Like if I had that skill, I would be better. My life would be better, and I could handle problems better.
I definitely looked up to him. It's not like I hated him and I didn't despise or anything. In fact, he was definitely one of my heroes growing up. So I can definitely see how there was aspiration in it as much as there was competition, resentment. I think a lot of the resentment come from whenever I wasn't better or whenever I wasn't sort of good enough, and that was more reflected towards myself. Like, come on, you can do better.
Yeah. Are you trying hard enough? Are you thinking this through? I get that all the time. It's in here.
Exactly.
And then,
Exactly.
well, if you think we've gotten a broadly, something that makes sense about why this kind of imagery at that time, the next interesting question would be, why did it stop? What changed in your life at that? So you changed houses. Did you suddenly get your own room?
No. In fact, we changed houses. I'm not sure. Let me think. So it was about 11? It was probably about 11. We moved houses. So that for me was a little bit different. I suppose I was able to make friends easier because of what school I was in. I was in the area that my friends in. So I'd, say my lifestyle changed a lot when we moved to that house. In the house before that, we had a very sort of like closed off group of friends that we both had, and so me and my brother's lives were very intertwined. And I guess when we moved into the new house, Warwick Road, less so. I think I only really saw him at bedtime, which is always really good for me because it's see him out and about, at school, and sort of like see him out with his friends in the street and stuff. But yeah, I'd usually only see him at bedtime, which I think helped a lot.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of different things going on there. You've got a physical change of location. That is very, as much as it can be traumatic in some senses, you're leaving behind the comfort and the familiar, you're braving the deep, dark forest to see what's out there. It's also a new beginning where there's freedom to experiment and make your own way, sort of. And you've got this division of the overlap in your lives has now diverged. You're no longer paralleling or walking the same path. You're coming back and forth. You're having more of your own individual experiences outside of his influence, away from his representation, his particular iconic type of success. And you're starting to have successes of your own, new friends, new hobbies and interests. Did you?
Definitely. And the room was a different layout as well, so it felt less. So the new room, I'll draw you another one.
Let's do it. I think that makes a difference too. Sometimes if you've, let's say you have a traumatic experience in a specific room, a lot of people get flashbacks when they go back into that room. So there's also an element of why this particular dream recurring. Well, the recurring could be you're still sleeping in that room, so you may remember the last time you had that dream, and that could spur a dream of the same type. Hey, remember when you thought these awful feelings? Hey, why don't you just think about that again when you go to bed? So sometimes literally changing environment can put a stop to a lot of things. Not always a panacea, but that definitely a contributing factor.
I think the interesting thing about this bedroom is our beds. So there's the first bedroom, right? Yes. And then this is the second bedroom here. So our beds are still side by side, but then now they have a sort of like a chest of drawers in between it.
Interesting.
So we're separated, and we
even more physically, literally separated. Yeah. As much as your life paths are diverging as well. And now there's a closet in the wall versus.
Yeah, exactly. It's a built-in wardrobe. So, and I don't face it. It's not facing me anymore. But the bedroom door is straight ahead of me, and I did have some nightmares around that time where a dark figure would walk past the bedroom door if it was open. So again, I think it's dark spaces, dark figures, but that wasn't really a recurring dream, I think, so much. I can remember that happening within my sleep a couple of times.
And as much as we kind of, in a way, bookmarked it or bookended it and then tried to start asking additional questions, I completely forgot to ask about or dig in a little bit of why this particular type of figure.
Because that would be interesting. That's what I get. Because is it an adult? Is it my brother? Is it me? It's like I've never known who is this dark figure. What is this monster that's decided to suddenly attack me?
Well, the first thing that came to my mind is that it wasn't anyone specific. It was so it was human or humanoid. It was not an animal. It was not a robot. I mean, those might be different things. It wasn't the closet flew open and suddenly it's a black hole sucking you. And those are all different representations. So there's something your brain's working with of of a human element to the consequences of being in this vulnerable position, or the threat seems to be human. But
okay,
yeah, so it would have to do with maybe other people, not necessarily specifically, but relationship wise, or sometimes we play with concepts because we have a little baby epiphany, and we're like, other people can not like me, other people can judge me, other people can tell me mean things that they don't like about me, and suddenly other people become a threat when before they were just playmates. But now you're starting to conceptualize that other people are a resource and a danger in a way.
Yeah.
So you've got this humanoid, and the idea that it's a shadowy figure, so that could be conflating a bunch of different things. Where it's the first thing that came to my mind though was the idea that it is not a specific person, and it's an obscured representation of a person. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel like if it was a specific person, I probably would have attached a face to that, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And it could be, I mean, I don't want to get too representational with it. It could be as easy as creepy shadow men coming out of the closet is just scary as hell. So your brain could have said, that's the worst thing I can imagine. It's just a shadow man. So it could be that simple, but I do tend to go the other direction with it of like, the obscured nature of the person is that it's more generalized rather than specific. It's more look at the idea of other people representing a threat. It's kind of where my brain goes, but also that that threat is indistinct. It's shadowy. You don't really know. It's like saying, okay, so other people could be a threat. How? I don't even know how. I can't even put a face on the danger itself. That's going to get me to a place where I would know how to respond. It's just that extra level of I'm so out of my depth. I'm fucked.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely being someone with Aspergers, growing up in a family of normalists, and they're all autistic as well. They just never bothered to get diagnosed. But living in a family of normalists, there was always that kind of panic feeling of kind of like, I don't know how I'm coping. I'm just pretending. Every day is pretending. So yeah, I can certainly see how that would translate into my dream psychology. Kind of like the threat is so big and so scary, and I don't even know what the hell it is.
Yeah, and the idea of being hit, just that there's even a physical suffering. You can feel it, even if it's just emotional in some ways. Yeah. There's like you'd almost rather be punched than you know what to do with it. But these weird emotional responses or lack thereof, which can be an equal problem. I know that too.
Like I say, I used to wake up from these dreams a couple of times, aching. But it would be like, the aching that you get after you've gone for a run. Like, I don't know, I don't actually run, so I can't say that specifically.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that feeling of just being slightly exhausted, your muscles ache, and being like, oh God, did that actually happen?
And that's a very real phenomenon too, is like, okay, so I'll tell a story I told once before, but there was let's say this rich old guy, and he was a captain in the British Army or something like that, and he used to have these dreams where a skeleton would choke him every time he fell asleep. Every time. Wow. Recurring dream, nightmares. So he hired a guy to, hit him with a stick every time he started to fall asleep. Don't let me fall asleep. So one night he fell asleep. The guy didn't stop him, or so he thought. And he had this dream the skeleton was choking him. And then the guy shook him and woke him up. And the captain dude was pissed. Like, why didn't you wake me up? He's like, I heard you start snoring and I woke you up immediately. That whole dream took place in the split second for the guy to hit him with the stick. So this dream for you, and why do I tell that story? Because this may be all related to your physical tension in your body. You may have actually been physically tensing your muscles in bed and have that been part of the dream experience to the point of waking up sore. That does actually happen, where we're not quite fully disconnected from our body, and that's where we get sleepwalking and sleep talking.
I was about to say, I the weird things I do in my sleep are I respond to conversation as if I'm awake and I walk around.
Okay.
I whimper like a wounded animal, which is something that I didn't realize I was doing until girlfriends and stuff told me over the years, going, you make some pretty crazy noises while you're asleep. And I had one even record me. Record me.
That's actually, I would want to hear that. If I were making weird noises, yeah.
It's like, to kind of give you a demo, it's like I'm going, oh, oh, and I'm just doing that for like 10 minutes at a time sometimes. It's like, what is going on? But then I also have like hypnopompic and hypnagogic hallucinations sometimes, where I'm like, as I'm falling asleep and waking up, suddenly it's really colourful, or sometimes, like I'll have a face appear in front of me and I'll be like, oh God, what was that?
I've never had that, but I've had the one where it's like you're falling asleep, I'm falling, and you jerk yourself awake. I've done that. Happened to me just like a week or two ago. Like, what did you jerk? What is that? Like falling asleep. I gotta catch myself from losing my balance. Yeah.
I think that's where your body goes into paralysis. Like just as you're falling asleep, it goes, right, you need to stay very still now. So it like takes off the feeling of being attached to the physical plane, and it's so weird. That's a good
explanation. Yeah,
I end up getting to this point, and I do wonder how much of that actually might relate to this feeling of falling out of bed that I had, because it's almost a very similar feeling of the body being sucked out underneath me. But yeah, I wonder how much that plays in a lot of these dream sensations, especially like I said about the not being able to see, because I feel like I might have been trying to open my eyes. It always reminds me of another dream I had years later, where I was in a shopping mall, like in a department store here, and I'm walking around and I'm trying to shop, but I can't see everything. Everything's too bright. And when I finally woke up, I realised I'd woken up with the lamp basically there.
Yeah,
and it's like. In this whole dream, I'm going around going, I can't shop, everything's too bright, I can't see anything. But it's because in my eyes, in my sleep, there's this big bloody light in my face.
And there's a lot of theories about that, of this weird feedback loop between our sleeping experience and physical stimulus occurring at the same time. And it's like, what, chicken and the egg in some ways, did I have that experience because there's a light in my face? And very reasonably so. That could be entirely possible. You don't want to discount that. But then it's also like, was I having the dream and then the light on my face just contributed to this one element of being unable to see?
That's what I feel about that one. Yeah, definitely. Where I'm like, I'm trying to have this dream where I'm shopping, but because there's this bright light in my face in the waking world, that's kind of like feeding into the nature of the dream. Like, otherwise it would just be a really boring shopping dream, which I don't usually have.
So I did take us back to the Shadow Man concept just to make sure we addressed it. Did you feel like you have more to say about that specific, or any other element of the dream? Because we were trying to focus on like, why did it go away? But
no, not really. That's a good way of sort of like wrapping up the dream. I wanted to know about the Shadow Man. It's good to pick your thoughts on that. Yeah. Why did they go away? Why do you think they went away?
It does seem like we were on the right track in terms of starting to explore elements that. So if we have an idea of the dream itself, and then we start looking at what was different in your life, we should hopefully be able to draw a little bit of a connection between why the dream was happening, what it was saying about your thought process at the time, and how your experience changed to make that thought process change, or to make it no longer relevant to your experience. So we were saying a new house, and you drew me the new layout of the room. Always good to get a new physical environment. But then, you're also, if we were looking at it as, I look up to my brother and I want to have competence like he does to deal with the real dangers in life that could have consequences, to be more competent myself, then probably the experience of repeated episodes of success, socially, gaining new skills, having confidence boosting, successful experiences on a more consistent
I hear you,
basis.
sort of like becoming more consistently confident may have made a big part in it, actually. Sort of like having less of those fears. I've been known to be an extremely fearless person. Usually when I know it won't get me killed. But people tend to admit that fact. But I tend to be seen as like amongst a few of my friends as the guy that will do anything, to give him an idea and he'll go and do it. So I guess, that probably started for me when I was about 14, 15. So a couple of years later when I started busking every day, Like that was a real, like that used to make me sweat like through my
Oh,
clothes
yeah.
when I first started. And then I think by the time I was 20, it was pretty much my full-time job. So I was like more than happy to go and stand out in a busy street in Manchester and play all day, you know. So, but yeah,
And that is a terrifying experience first time. Even if you think you're
God, yeah.
a decent musician, you can sing okay. Now you are face to face with other people that are going to have their own damn opinion, and
Yeah.
you don't know what they like, and you don't know if they care or if they're going to
A
respond.
lot of the time it's like, thump, thump, thump,
Yep.
thump. So if you're not singing a cover that they're really going to know and want to stop and listen to, then you've lost them already, you know.
That's
so
true.
And I first busking tour I did, I played all of my own original songs, and it showed. Because
Yeah.
see all these buskers on YouTube, and they've got these big crowds around them. I didn't have any of that whatsoever. I was just kind of stood there by shopping centres going, "I'm here."
That just brought to mind a great video, and maybe we should try to link it down below. But it's this guy in Portland here, and I actually ran into him in public once in front of a bookstore. He plays a stand-up like cello or something, and he loops it through a recording box. So he does like, he lays down a certain line, then loops that, and then he goes back and on top of it and plays, and then he starts doing percussion stuff on there. Then he goes back and he plays the lead on top of it, and he'll do these 10, 15, 20-minute songs.
I really love the
that
sound
was amazing. That's amazing.
Anything that's slightly outside of the box, anything that's slightly avant-garde is right up my street. So yeah, I'll definitely link it if you can remember to, and I'll
try and find him. Yeah, I can't, because I did track down, like, he sells CDs. He's like, here's some original music. I did track him down once, but it just reminded me of that, the whole that busking in public thing. And to be able to do that live, like I can do some things with video and audio after the fact. So I read audiobooks and I put them up there, but there's a lot of post-processing and a lot of, I'm going to delete that and re-record because I just got a mush mouth in the middle of a sentence. But could I do like public readings live from a book? No, I just fumble all my words, and it would not be given with the same tone and inflection. I got to really construct a performance out of that.
It's something that comes from like a number of different transferable skills, one of which is not really caring what other people think too much.
That's a good one.
But then I think the other thing that goes into it is just, it's like you're saying, I think the benefit of busking is that it's not recorded. And sometimes nowadays, because of technology, it's a little bit more recorded, so it puts you on edge a bit more. But usually, I practice my songs really like to death, so I know them and I know I'm not going to really mess them up. And then the other thing is, it's about kind of being in this semi-meditative state when you're performing. So actually not being this person that's on the surface. The conscious mind is kind of in the bed. In the head, thinking about cheese or like other things like what I fancy doing next week. It's in there doing something, and then the motor functions are really running everything else. They're running the voice, they're running the guitar. The motor functions are almost in complete control there, and I'm just going, in my mind, I'm going, oh, don't forget there's that line coming up. Yeah, okay, I'm going to carry on thinking about cheese now, which is such a strange thing. When I'm teaching music, I'm constantly teaching them, you've got to get to this point where you aren't doing it, your brain is doing it. In order to get there, you have to teach your brain to do it over and over and over again, and then take a step back, see if your brain can do it on its own. And, a lot of people get baffled by that until they experience it and go, oh, I get it now. I can play a musical instrument. You go, there you go. And it's the whole thing of like, you don't rely on yourself when you're live, you rely on that. And if you can't rely on that, you probably shouldn't be live.
There's something very important in there too. And I mean, it reminded me of the whole idea of athletes that get into the zone, and they describe it as, I'm not even doing what my body's doing. No. It's just doing it. I'm telling it where to go and what I want to happen, but there's no conscious thought process of, now bounce the ball, now catch it with the fingertips, now bend the elbow. All of that stuff has to be automatic so you can strategize third person, so to speak.
Exactly. And I severely injured my back one night at a gig because of that, because I basically hemorrhaged a disc in the middle of my back, which ended up the next day almost causing me to not be able to walk.
Wow.
But because
you were on autopilot?
Because I was on autopilot to such an extent. I'd had 2 ciders, and then I'd basically got on stage and I was just kicking my leg all night. And at some point, just the constant vibrations of kicking up had like basically caused my back to go pop,
Oh no!
And I didn't notice. I carried on drinking after the show. I must have had 3 or 4 more drinks. There was an after party. I went to work the next day, and it wasn't really until I started to recover from the hangover, I was like, there's something wrong here. And then, like, as the nerves become irritated, I stopped being able to use my left leg. And I was like, no.
Oh, I know that feeling.
And you can see how athletes, professional footballers, soccer players, they get injured because you're so in the zone. You ain't thinking about what your bones and joints are doing. You're practice and you're going for it.
There's very much something there too, because I get this experience, and I don't know if this is common to humans. Maybe it is, or maybe it's just me and the autistic brain thing going on. But if I'm in a project and I'm thinking it's just consuming the entirety of my mental bandwidth, I don't eat, I don't drink, I don't feel much pain, and if I'm really, it's like I don't realize what I've done until I sit down and take a break, and then I'm like, oh, that hurts. Oh, when did I do that? Yeah. Where's this cut? Where did that cut come from? Jesus, what did I do? And it's
too zoned in, man.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of amazing. I mean, it lets you do amazing things, but you got to be careful afterwards. You're like, I pulled something. Oh shit.
There's a guy who can affect a part of his brain that regulates temperature. So you can stick him in like an ice bath and he'll be able to go into his mind and be able to think, I'm 25 degrees, and his body temperature will regulate and make him feel like he's 25 degrees.
Was that on that like Superhumans show? Like the guy that runs barefoot in the snow?
Exactly. It was one of those. It's a
that's amazing.
Monk, right?
And the blind guy that can draw a building from sound.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, that is like, what the hell? That's some Daredevil shit right there.
That's
I've
amazing.
Seen Daredevil. I didn't think I'd ever see it in real life. But it's like, these people are crazy, and I think it's the power of the mind. We massively underestimate how we can use the mind to apply all sorts of different skills. It's just a matter of learning it, and a matter of it's like, we're not born learning how to do this with our eyebrows or like.
I still can only do one side. I cannot make the other one go up. I can't do it.
I used to be able to do both, but I've lost, and that's the thing. You learn it by feeling where the muscle is first, and then practice and practice and practice, refine, and then you're like, every time
to talk too, it becomes automatic. Yeah. I'm not thinking about how to form the letter E with my mouth. It just happens. Yeah.
People say things like, humans are stupid. And I get that there's different levels of intellect and stuff, but we are animals that would literally create languages and build houses, and it's like, any human being that can formulate language and effectively communicate is fucking clever as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, yeah.
We need to seriously stop setting the bar so high. Come on. It's like, we're an animal that can communicate and build histories. Like, what?
I think we spoke of Rogan before, and I think he had a great line that was like, come on, we're monkeys that make sounds with our mouth, and we communicate telepathically with each other. This is amazing. I love that. I love that conceptualization.
Oh man, there's a thing, I can't remember where I saw it. I think it's on a documentary called I Am, and it's directed by the guy who directed Ace Ventura and all these other great comedy films. And what he talks about is like how electromagnetics can affect emotional transfer. So if I got angry right now, you'd get really angry, and some of that is to do with these electromagnetic receptors called mirrored synapses in the brain. So it's but that's all really, 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 really fascinating. We as a culture, it seems to be like fashion, looks, social reputation. Those are like the tantamount things, and actually we're really impressive. So I'm just going to blow my nose for a second. You may want to edit it out with like a trumpet solo or something.
I'm okay with it to leave it in unless you want me to. I don't care much, but I'll talk over it a bit too. I
have a very British nose blow. Hang on, listen.
That's a good one.
Oh yes.
I love it. No, I was going to say something too about that. Ooh.
Excuse me.
Now I think I completely lost my train. I was going to bookend it, but we'll bring it back around to what we were talking about in the beginning. What was it you were talking about? The idea of going on to someone else's show. Now you're going to take this dream and go to the and talk about, what does shadow people mean? Did you have a shadow person in your dream? And that's and it relates, I think, to what you're talking about, like, because there's this whole parapsychology that is considered less scientific or less rigorous, just less than in general. And I don't know that it is. we haven't been able to prove a lot of stuff, but that research needs to be done. Like, there's nothing I would love more than figuring out how to unlock human telekinesis. If I would love to just float things over to my hand or fly. I want to fly. Let's figure out how to
I want to fly. One
fly.
of my lucid dreams is learning how to fly. And what really annoyed me is you see the guy with the gravity jetpacks. You put a jetpack on and you've got these things on your hands and you use your hands and the jetpack to kind of like create this tripod of flight.
Oh yeah.
I had that dream when I was a teenager where I jumped up, and it was a lucid dream as well, so I actually retained the information pretty clearly, where I jumped up and I held the air with my hands below my waist. I held the air in place, and it was almost by using calisthenics that I was able to kind of manipulate myself in my environment. What's interesting is exactly how these gravity jetpacks work. So it's like, there's a little bit of human intellect going on there in my dreams, where my brain is problem solving and going, if you're going to fly, you're going to have to do it this way. And that guy has obviously had a similar revelation. That's helped him to develop this entire company. So that's crazy.
Oh, for sure. And it relates even more because, so I just released my 12th book. I got book 13 waiting to go, which also talks about children's dreams. Very interesting, because we were discussing your children's dream as a child. But then I've just started editing, because I'm always like working way ahead. I've got book 14. And right off the bat in the introduction, this Maurice Nicole, I think is his name, he's talking about how there are physiological scientists or medical practitioners who in his day and age completely discount the possibility that what's going on in the mind is separate and distinct, that there is a distinction between the psychological and the physical. And he lays out some fantastic arguments. So now imagine the serious, studious, approved science of the day was telling people we're just bundles of nerves. It's a nerve disorder. We can fix the nerves and we will cure what appears to be a brain problem. And you've got this other guy saying there's a whole world up there that we don't know anything about. And there were two competing camps, and we've actually kind of come, the psychology is real camp one, and separated itself from physiology in a way that they interrelate, and we can you just destroy parts of the brain and you lose function. We know that for sure, but there's something else going on there.
There is definitely, and I kind of alluded to it a bit earlier, but I studied Taoism last year, Tao Te Ching, which is kind of this ancient Asian philosophy. And what interested me about that is it talks about the way. Tao actually directly translates to way, and in that, it's kind of talking about this essence that's in everything, kind of these energetic, not necessarily energetic, because that's lending itself too much into kind of proprietary and orthodoxy, whereas Taoism is very much about not having those things, just seeing fundamentals. And in this, it really does talk about everything is everything else. I am you, you and me, we are the universe, and I really like that, because that does allow for there to be something else going on within the human consciousness. And I think, as my dad put it, and he didn't coin this. This probably came from an actual expert somewhere. What was it? I can't remember what he said. If I remember it, I'll come back round to it. But essentially, oh no, I've lost it now. I've lost it.
I was going to give you a moment of silence and just think about it, but
not interrupt.
That's okay if it comes back to you, but there's actually I've been a fan of Buddhism, and
I've remembered now.
Go ahead.
Quickly, I'll just quickly finish. Basically, what he said to me, and this is when I was very young, was that we are all infinite points of the same consciousness. We're not infinite points of consciousness. We're infinite points of the same consciousness experiencing itself from different points of view. And I was like, wow.
I've always been a fan of that concept as well. Like, what if the soul of God blew itself, like you watch those cartoons that and that the cartoon character's head pops, like, well, what if God did that and made himself into 7 billion souls so he could understand who and what he is? That's kind of how I see human consciousness. Maybe it's self-aggrandizing because we think we're better than all the other animals. Maybe it's true. I don't know. Way
they might have a similar sort of consciousness, if not the same. We just don't interpret because we don't share a language with them. But you were saying about Buddhism.
Oh, yeah. Well, just to bookend that thought too, is like, not only blew his soul into 7 billion pieces, and that's us, but blew his physical, whatever that singularity was at the beginning of the Big Bang. We're like living in the body of God is kind of how I conceptualize it. But that feeds into the Buddhism thing because they're like, all is one. It's all God. But then
in Lakesh Alakim.
Right. And the yin yang is, in my opinion, the oldest name for God. It's like, this is everything. This is everything that is.
This is the seen and the unseen. This
pre-linguistic iconic representation of one of the first names of for everything. But on top of that, then you start getting into the Buddhist conceptions of, this is where I was going originally, everything being connected, and you look at the laws of physics, cause and effect.
Yes,
literally, just everything is connected because this thing touches that thing. It's like billiard balls on the table, being bouncing off each other. This stuff blows my mind too. This is why I
am mildly ashamed, only mildly ashamed to say that I did take quite a bit of LSD when I was a young man, and as part of that, I had an epiphany that everything is just vibrationary. Everything's just vibrations, because when you look at colors, when you look at sound, when you look at any way that we perceive and we interpret, it tends to be based on a fluctuation, an oscillation of energy or matter, and because of that, it's kind of like everything's vibrating, man. It was that typical like hippie sort of epiphany that I was having, but how that really comes back to what you're saying about consequences. It's true. I can't do anything without that vibration affecting everything else around me in a small way.
It's just like a pond, man.
I'm drinking this water right now, and that's water that someone else now can't drink in this purity because it's going to be gone. Like it's going to be less pure the next time it's drunk.
And then the perfect circle of the yin yang and everything being divided like that. You ingest, excrete, goes back into the clouds, falls again, and someone in Canada is going to be drinking that same water 100 years from now. Who knows?
What I love is like
fish in the Pacific Ocean. Yeah.
The idea in Buddhism that nothing is unchanging. It's like everything's constantly in this period of changing. It's like as we grow old, we experience entropy on like a biological level. But yeah, nothing is ever unchanging. But what is interesting is argon, one of those fundamental elements of our atmosphere, that takes so long to break down that you and I are breathing the same argon that Alexander the Great did, that Isaac Newton did.
That's amazing.
So, the argon's the same argon that's been in the air since then.
Wow,
so
I never thought of that.
Wow, I'm literally breathing not the same air, but the same elements in that air as some of the world's most fascinating people.
For sure.
And that to me is...
And then when you were talking about the vibrational states too, it blew my mind when I realized that, everything's made of these atoms and they're bond, they're electronic or whatever they call those bonds. But even, and so then you have solid, liquid, and gas, and even apparently solid things are still in motion. It's just such a tiny, tight, slow motion, so densely packed that it's this illusion of we move through the air easily, we move through water with more resistance, and we can't appear to move through solid things, but and in fact can't, but the same principles, that same movement, that same motion is still present in even things that feel immovable or
there's
unmoving.
Like trillions, I think there's trillions of cells in the human body. It might just be trillions of cells in the brain. I'll have to go back and check that.
I haven't looked it up yet.
but if you look at yourself, you don't look like you're moving, you don't look like a lot's happening, but there's literally a metropolis of activity happening within every single nanometer of that. And it looks still. It looks like nothing's happening.
Oh, yeah. And even before you get to the cellular level, if you just zoom in far enough, you'll see your skin crawling with all kinds of bugs. Most people don't want to think about that.
Man. Oh, the face mites. Oh, I always look at my eyebrows and go, where are they today?
They're keeping it clean. They're eating my sheddings.
Yeah, exactly. They're eating my dander.
The funny thing is we can be too sterile. We kill all the bugs on our body. Other bugs are going to come and eat us. We're living in this symbiotic relationship with these critters that keep us alive.
I've got this crazy dry water here, and that seems to have a really bad effect on my skin. And I think it's because I've got naturally oily skin. So when you've got it's constantly dried off, all of my mites are going, "You're so dehydrated, man." We need some oil up in here, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Tanning properly.
Oh, it's good. Well, I feel like I've kept you for a good long time, and it's actually getting late in your neck of the woods. I can do this for hours, but
I think I've got another show after this. I think it's actually, I didn't realise.
Oh shit, you gotta go. We're having too much fun.
Because what is it? The 4 p.m. Pacific time. When's that? Is that midnight here?
It is currently Pacific. It is 12:15 in the afternoon, just past noon. So
12:15.
So it should be closer to. Shit, I don't know what, are you on GMT over there?
Yeah, it's 8 p.m. here, so I reckon that is midnight. Yeah.
Okay,
so
you got time.
I haven't got another show till midnight. So, but yeah, I will probably have a nap before that, because last time I did 2 shows in the States, I ended up having one at midnight and the other one until about 3 in the morning, and I was pooped afterwards.
Oh yeah, no, it's always good to have a break. I think we covered a lot of great ground and a lot of very interesting conversation.
It's been a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Well, all of this from a dream took like 15 seconds. You fell out of bed. I mean, people think it's not important, or they dismiss it, or they don't realize quite how powerful it can be to just reflect on these experiences and get a second opinion and someone kind of walk you through the steps and see if you can make some sense of it.
Honestly, you've actually helped me to reframe it in my head, because I had this impression as I was going through it, you know, that it's, you know, this haunting dream that, you know, it's kind of troubled me and traumatized me in a way. But when I look at it in the way that you've explained it, it's quite an empowering dream, and it's quite to look at it, it's kind of like me overcoming something and working through something in my head as a child, and that's quite a powerful thing. So I appreciate you doing that for me, Benjamin. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Now we'll just do the wrapping it up stuff. So nice. Number one, everybody, thanks for listening. We have had our friend Billy Nomad here, who is a singer, songwriter, recording artist, producer. You can find him at the Billy Nomad on Facebook and Instagram. And these links will be in the description below. Also, stop what you're doing, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends about the Dreamscapes podcast, because I always need more fascinating people to talk to. The pressure's all on me. You just bring a dream, and I ramble, and that's what I do. So
I've had a lot of fun.
Yes, and it's often a lot more fun than people think. They think they're going to be on the spot, but anyway, you can support my work. Get a coffee mug, T-shirt. 12 currently available. 12 books of historical dream literature. I can't believe it. Working on book 13 and 14 already. That is the housekeeping, and I'm just going to say once again to our guests, thanks for being here, and everybody out there, thanks for listening.
Thanks, Benjamin. Thanks, everyone. Take care.